Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands like Pepsi, Newell, Revlon, and Mondelez build product detail page, retail media, and sales enablement content more than 80% faster than their category competitors at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Marlow Nickell, co-founder and CEO of Grocery TV. Marlow co-founded Grocery TV in 2016 and has built it into one of the leading in-store retail media advertising platforms in the industry. Prior to Grocery TV, Marlow was a co-founder of Cube ATX, a software development business, and a business analyst at McKinsey. He graduated from the University of Texas at Austin. We discuss how and why Marlow founded Grocery TV, his perspective on all things omnichannel and in-store, and his predictions for the next 12 months and beyond. Please enjoy my conversation with Marlow Nickell. Marlow, great to see you.
Yeah, likewise, Dave. It's good to see you. Appreciate having me on.
I'm excited about today's conversation with you. It's such a great space that you're in. Would you take us back and tell us about how you founded Grocery TV?
For sure. And I mean, I like to start by saying it's a bit different than a traditional founding story in that I did not have the original idea. I was kind of fortunate enough to be brought into the business by my co-founder and CEO, Don Elke, and his dad and uncle, who actually have the largest checkout fixture manufacturing company in the US, which is pretty niche. But that's kind of, they understand retail and they've been in it for 20 plus years. And so they saw an opportunity, having been in that space, the checkout area of the store where those kind of gum and candy racks are. And they saw the opportunity to bring digital media into that format and really empower retailers to reach their consumers, their shoppers, deliver messaging to them in a dynamic way, and then also have the opportunity there for brands to reach their shoppers as well. So they brought me in originally to help kind of build a proof of concept because, as you mentioned, I was doing a software development business before this. That initial kind of test run went well and got really good feedback from retailers and brands. And so from there, we kind of spun out from their business, and they were actually our first seed capital in the company. So a lot to them in terms of where we're at today.
What a great story. How did you all meet?
Well, so Don actually was kind of the unofficial roommate for my brother at University of Southern California. It'd be a longer story for another time, but my brother is actually a brand manager at P&G right now. He did not like his freshman year roommate and ended up sleeping on the floor in Don's room quite a number of times. And Don actually got his first job as an intern at a company my dad started his freshman and sophomore summer. So that's where we got to know each other real well.
A great story. I'd love to hear about your journey so far with the company.
For sure. I mean, as you said, we started in 2016, spent a lot of years kind of building the technology out. We're a bit unique in the space in that most folks have kind of a retail or a advertising background. While we do have those retail roots because of my co-founder's dad and uncle, really our background's from a technology perspective. So we have built a full stack platform, from the actual hardware and software that is necessary to enable the in-store network, all the way up to the ad networks that we're connecting with, the different programmatic providers, SSPs, DSPs, all that kind of stuff. And also the content management system that retailers use. So it took a while to build all of that, but we launched in 2017 with our first retailers, and then kind of kept growing the network from there, had some initial seed capital from some private investors. And in 2019, we got our first venture capital investment from Silverton here in Austin. And around that point, we were kind of like a $1 million run rate, which is kind of typical for your Series A, about 1,000 stores. From there, we kept growing. And in 2022, took a Series B investment from Sageview, which is up out of Connecticut. And around then, it was about 2,500 stores, kind of a $9 million run rate in terms of the business. And that's really enabled us to kind of catapult the product and the network forward to go from being kind of a point solution at checkout where we started to being a full store platform where we power all in-store signage. So it's been a really fun journey. Still got a ways to go, of course, but it's cool to see the development of the industry.
It's amazing. Talk to us a little about what full stack means. You've got to put hardware in the stores, you've got to service that, you've got software, got a content piece of this.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about each of those pieces, how they work together, and what that means for potential customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps to start by just imagining yourself in a store because everybody shops in grocery stores for the most part. So if you're standing there and you see a digital screen in store, like just even that placement of the physical hardware is in and of itself a challenge, right? Where do you put it? How do you actually like install it? Is there fixturing involved? It's not always just a TV. Sometimes you got, sort of electricians that have to come in. There's usually a media player that's also involved of some kind. Like you got to have some way to actually power the content that goes on that screen, and then how you keep that content loop in the right kind of structure. So just in the store alone, there's a lot of questions around how to set that infrastructure up. It's quite a bit harder than what you do online with like an e-com site. So we bring a lot of that capability into the conversation when we work with a retailer. We can be a strategist for them to think about what store areas make sense. And then we can actually do the infrastructure itself and provide that, handle the CapEx, handle the OpEx, and even the retail ops piece of it. So like keeping the network up, so that screens don't go dark. And then, as you kind of go up out of the store, you're connecting to the internet. You've got a bunch of ad networks out there when it comes to monetization. And so we've really been kind of leading the charge there. We were the first to integrate with folks like Vistar, Place Exchange, and many of the other kind of digital at-home SSPs that are out there, as well as many others that are starting to get into the in-store media space. And that basically lets us connect to all the major programmatic demand-side platforms like a Trade Desk or something like that. And then the last piece is, from a retailer perspective, you got to have a way to get your content in stores and reach your shoppers. So typically you'd call that a CMS or content management system. We've got our own that's like perfect, intentionally built for retail. And so really takes into account the needs that a retailer has for planning and scheduling campaigns and makes it super easy for their marketing teams.
So I got to ask, you're such a thoughtful and well-spoken individual. Where did you learn your business skill set? Did you grow up with it? Did you learn it along the way? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have had a lot of folks that I've been able to learn from. Pretty fortunate in that regard. As I mentioned, my dad had started a company when he was around my age, and basically got to watch him, build that to where it is today, and then many other businesses that he's been involved with since then. So learned a lot from him. My mom too deserves a lot of credit. She was very big on the business side. So I was kind of the dorky kid that wore a lot of Oxford shirts and wanted to be an entrepreneur from a young age. And then, in my family, we've got a lot of folks that have started companies. I have a cousin who actually started a brand called Amazing Grass, which was really the first major wheatgrass and alfalfa grass products. So before people wanted to drink green stuff, he was out there talking to Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and convincing people that it's actually healthy to get that kind of stuff. And now, of course, that's really big with athletic greens and all that stuff that's out there. But he kind of started that trend. So there's a lot of folks I've had that have been great mentors for me along the way.
I love it. Well, in 2022, as you mentioned, you raised $30 million from Sageview Capital. Tell us what that was like. I mean, amazing fundraise. And what are you doing with the capital?
Yeah, I mean, before even talking about the money, I think it's really important to think about like the folks that you're bringing into your business and onto your board, and kind of involved in the management and leadership of the company. And so have to give a shout out to Dean Nelson, who's one of our board members and comes from Sageview as the partner that led the round. He's got just a ton of experience as an operator, like out building businesses, and even has some of his own that he runs today. And so I've learned just a ton from him. And when we talk about like scaling the company from Series A stage, which is still really early and maybe a little bit less professional, to something that can really be industry changing, like having someone like that's done it before has been super helpful. And then, from a monetary perspective, we grew the team quite a bit. So we went from being profitable in 2021 to spending a bit more money, and it was helpful to have that. And then, of course, from a CapEx standpoint, because our model is one where we go in and we provide the CapEx for the retailer, we set the network up for them. It is pretty capital intensive. So that's allowed us to really build the network out, build the product line out, and kind of be that full store platform.
If we think back just a little bit, it seemed like store might be on the way out. There was a lot of press during the pandemic, of course, that there was this uncertainty about the future of omnichannel in the store. And yet now it's virtually everywhere. It's the main topic. Tell us a little about what that was like and how it's affected the business.
Ironically, COVID was super helpful for us. Obviously, a horrible thing, like, for individuals and globally. And I mean, most businesses around the country, it was an incredibly difficult time. I had my first son then, so I had a 6 month old that we're dealing with as all that was happening. So, pretty stressful moment for sure. But what it did do well for our business is prior to COVID, we had a lot of investors that were saying to us, like, is grocery even going to be around? You have Instacart, you have all these e-com platforms. They saw the world headed to a place where everyone shopped online for everything and that the brick and mortar store was just going to go away. We fundamentally believe that wasn't the case. I think that's actually kind of a depressing world to live in where you can't go and like interact with other humans. But that was the prevailing assumption prior to COVID. And then you had COVID where we're all forced to be locked up in our houses. And the one place that people were still going to was the grocery store to do their weekly shopping. It was kind of like your one moment to like, get out. And I've never really gotten that question since then about like, where's the store headed? Like, it's pretty obvious that while e-com has a very big role to play, and especially for certain product sets, for grocery in particular, 85% of the transactions are happening in store. And I think that's here to stay. And so it's been really helpful just for the people to see that like in their personal lives.
So if you look at the retailer perspective today, obviously huge investment in retail media. How are they thinking about in-store and how does retail media tie into that?
Our mutual friend, Andrew Lipsman, he talks a lot about the kind of like next wave of retail media, right? You first had just monetizing your e-com platforms, and that was kind of the obvious thing to go do. Then you started to use that first party data that you had to go and do digital media buys. So, CTV and other types of offsite advertising. And those are really interesting and exciting. But again, the reality is that 85% of transactions are happening in store. And so e-commerce is great, but you're kind of missing the majority of the traffic that's happening. And especially for some of the retailers that are not Amazon, right? Most of their stuff is in store. And so there's a lot of excitement, I think, around the potential to bring that online and start to fold that into these retail media platforms. It is quite different though. To go and do it is not just code you can drop into your e-commerce platform. You've got to actually build the infrastructure. And you got to be really thoughtful about the experience in store. There's a lot of folks that have tried things that I think have pissed people off. And you got to make sure that the experience is getting better or at least is neutral and that you're not doing things that frustrate shoppers. It's definitely not an easy one, but it's one that I think everybody understands is, obviously has some real potential. On the brand side, I think that there's, again, a lot of excitement, but also probably some challenges. There's questions around how do we measure, how do we do, think about audience segments. This is not a one-to-one format. It's something closer to TV or out of home where you've got these broader audiences and it's more mid and upper funnel. And so, there's a lot of opportunity there in terms of the reach and the frequency you're getting and kind of the brand safety, the quality, but it's different, right? And one of the biggest challenges I see is just where does the budget even come from? Traditionally, if you're within the four walls of the store, that's shopper, that's bottom of funnel, that's all about conversion. It's not about awareness. And, how do you think about that as a brand, right? Who owns that? So, challenges and opportunities ahead for sure.
I want to parse apart a couple things you said there. One is the in-store experience. What are you seeing? You're on the ground in these stores doing these deployments. What's best in class look like? What's innovative when it comes to that in-store experience?
Yeah, ironically, and I'm a bit of contrarian here, but I would say the least innovative it is, or the less innovative it is, the better. So ideally, you walk in the store and it just feels normal. Because I think if shoppers walk in and something kind of shocks them a little bit or like interferes with what they want to do, like being able to like grab a drink or get to the product or transact, like that's gonna be really frustrating for them, and you're not really helping with the shopping experience. You're not doing good service to your brand as a retailer. So we always talk about like just do stuff that feels normal, and ideally reduces the footprint of what you're already doing because there's a lot of print media happening in stores. It's kind of all over the place and not usually that coordinated. And so a lot of times I'll show retailers pictures of like, here's what your entrance looks like. And there's like 3 or 4 different signs. And I'll say, hey, what if we could consolidate this down to one single screen and have consistent messaging that you could control centrally from your marketing team? So that's, again, it's a bit of a contrarian approach because I know there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, but I think you got to start with just like, what does a good store experience look like? And then we can start to build from there.
The other thing you touched on there was budget. You talk with a lot of brands. How are they thinking about budget, organizationally? Where does it come from? And how do they think about the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of work backwards from what you asked there. I mean, I think the opportunity everyone agrees makes sense and is exciting. So I have a lot of conversations with like nodding heads and interest in getting into this and like kind of trying to figure out how. Where things sometimes run into a wall or have challenges is where does this come from? Who owns this? Is it out of home? Is it the digital media buyer because you can transact programmatically? It's a lot of the same media types. A lot of times it's the same people that are running video online. Or is it retail media? Or is it your shopper marketing team? Like there's all these different folks that could be relevant and they all have different priorities and different types of campaigns they're trying to do. I mean, the biggest one that I think is a challenge for brands, and some of them are succeeding in navigating this, but it's definitely there, is historically they've thought about retailers, on an account by account basis. And so they'll have their plan and their budget for Walmart and for Dollar General and for Kroger and, some of the other retailers. But it kind of stops after like the tier one retailers. They might have a couple tier twos in there. But generally the rest of them, which is about half the market, they just don't have a plan for that. They don't have a budget assigned to it. And so it really has become an opportunity, but also a challenge, right? Where the brands that have jumped on it, they kind of are on their own. They own the category, basically. They have the share of voice, but then others, they can't really figure out how to navigate the budget or figure out how to navigate the agency to get it done.
So in a way, if I hear you right, being a leader in this space can really be a huge opportunity because organizationally you've figured out how to invest, how to use this particular medium to reach the shopper.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to this idea of like, omnichannel is really everything, right? If you can transact digitally, all the barriers can start to come down. You can have a single trade desk account and you can buy almost everything, right? And so the brands that get that, it's a huge opportunity, right? You're now able to kind of own your category. And I mean, we get from sometimes those folks will ask us like about exclusivity or things like that. And I kind of joke a little bit. I'm like, you don't really need to worry about it just yet. Like it's so new that if you're the first mover here, you're kind of already getting it probably for your category. It's not always true, but it definitely is like early days. And I think for the folks that are moving first, they're getting to really take a large share of voice for what they're doing.
One of the interesting things about your company in particular is that you've really helped create the category and create awareness. Tell us a little about how that works, the process. How have you seen the conversations kind of evolve from those early days in 2016 to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, again, part of this was just where is the store going? Like, is it going to go away? Right. So first, just trying to remind people that the grocery store is the center of our community. It's the thing that we do every week, and it reaches basically every American. And so I think some of the events that were outside of our control helped reaffirm that for folks. But we talk a lot about just reminding folks that grocery is this really interesting category. It's a really interesting audience, and we think that the store is this very kind of underutilized medium that you can reach from an advertising perspective. There's other things too. Again, they're kind of bigger than us, but we've really leaned into. So obviously the growth of retail media has been super exciting. And I think reaffirmed for people the value of reaching shoppers who are in a buying mindset. That like when you're doing advertising in that kind of way, it's actually a little bit more effective and interesting than when you're doing this kind of interruptive stuff, right? Like they're on social media or they're trying to watch a video that is entertainment. And the last thing they want to see is your ad. Versus if they're in a buying mindset, they're trying to buy stuff, they're trying to shop. It's not as weird to see advertising content then, right? And so I think those have really converged and we've tried to lean into those messages. And then I think the last thing, I mean, just there's this kind of whole reevaluation of how to do digital advertising online today, right? With death of the cookie and how that's shuffled things around. And obviously CTV's had explosive growth, but there's questions about like, how much of that is actually showing up on a TV or what are those channels you're reaching and the costs associated with it. And so, yeah, I mean, for a brand that wants to have broad reach and high frequency, like I think there's a lot of questions right now about where they're going to get that from.
I love it. Speaking of content, I can't help but ask. Here at It's Rapid, we're in the business of helping some brands and retailers build content and media. When you think about content and the media that runs on the screens in the store, what do you see? Is it product? Is it recipes? Is it ads? What form does it take?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you a simple answer, but as you probably know, there's no silver bullets on this stuff. We talk a lot about just considering, yourself in the store and kind of what your shopping journey is like. And we try to break it down by the different store areas because really at the end of the day, a grocery store is many stores within a store. And so are you at the entrance and you're walking in and you're kind of at the beginning of that journey that's reaching everybody? For that, that's going to be a different message. It's going to be something that's a little more broad. Like you can even have non-endemic advertising there because it's really just an audience. But then as you get further into the store, you're closer to particular categories. You got to be really thoughtful about that and make sure that the content is relevant to what's there. And for that content itself, like it's got to be something that's interesting. And, if it's food, like really makes your mouth water, makes you think about it. If it's more of like a consumer packaged good or like a, let's say home care type thing, like maybe showing you a use case you had considered or how to use it if it's maybe a bit of a trickier product or a newer product. And yeah, some of this is just going back to the basics of marketing, like how do you connect with people in a way that resonates? But yeah, a lot of video content, a lot of really cool opportunities to get creative, and reach people when, again, they're in a mindset to buy things.
So when a brand goes to partner with you and build out their campaigns, are they thinking about this in the view of their entire retail media strategy? Is store kind of a piece on its own, or how does that conversation go?
To be honest, it's going to vary based on the buyer that we're working with and what their campaign objectives are. There are some cases where it's more kind of top of funnel, just building brand awareness. And so that's going to have more of this sort of far-reaching, like consistent perspective, right? So like you got your digital out of home, like billboard, large format, showing that product or that service, and then you've got it in store, and then you've got it on the phones and all the different spaces, and just having that consistent message. So sometimes that's really all you want is just the consistent messaging. And other times you want to be more specific to the format and actually take advantage of it. So we've seen things like, degree deodorant saying like, hey, while you're standing in line, like get 10 calf raises in, and you've got this kind of funny dynamic where people are literally doing calf raises in line. And if it's a new product launch, maybe showing like, here's an interesting use case as, you get to this aisle and check it out. So it's just going to vary depending on what they're trying to accomplish. But again, I think, like any form of advertising, you want to think about the medium and get creative with how you can take advantage of it.
Well, as you mentioned, we met through Andrew. He's got many great posts, one of which is about these waves of retail media. I'd love to get your perspective on where are we in the evolution of the space?
Yeah, for in-store particular, I think as exciting as it is still very early, right? We still don't really have any major, tier one national retailers that are doing in-store media yet. I think most of what they're doing is experimentation. And so, I think that, for a lot of brands, they're maybe still on the sidelines, kind of waiting to see what happens at that larger scale. I will say for the brands that are starting to jump in early and do some more test and learns, like they're really getting to, kind of have a bit of an advantage on what works and what doesn't. And, ultimately, I think it is going to be in every store, and you're going to have, this kind of broad coverage that we're helping kind of drive forward. But yeah, it's still early days, and it's exciting with all the growth ahead.
If there were some people you want to meet in the next year, brands, retailers, who would be on your list? Feel free to not name names or name names either way, but just curious who's kind of on your wish list for the next year.
Yeah, I think we break it down into kind of the retail side and the brand side, right? On the retail front, there are a number of folks that still have not really figured out their in-store media strategy, and some of them I'm already talking to, but obviously would love to be in conversations with every major retailer, and whether it's helping them think through their strategy and be a partner in part of their stack if they really want to own and operate their network, or if they want someone that can really be that full stack platform that they can partner with, completely. Either case, like would love to be a part of the conversation there with retailers that are looking at in-store media. On the brand side, there's the obvious ones, right? Like you've got your major CPG brands that spend a ton of money every year on this kind of stuff and are really relevant to the category. Whether that's like a Hershey or a Mars, some of the more center store folks like a P&G or Kellogg's or any of those kinds of obvious ones, right? I think they all have kind of a voice to play in terms of where this is headed, and even just being able to get the perspective on what works and what doesn't. And then, the last part, from a agency standpoint, there's a lot of major folks out there that I think are thought leaders on kind of how to build a medium. And so we try to keep a pulse on that side as well.
Well, you've done some really exciting work. You built a great company here. looking ahead at the next 12 months and beyond, predictions for what's on the horizon?
I mean, I think just more growth ahead, right? I can tell you a lot of retailers that we're already talking to right now that have plans to do a lot of deployments this year. And, for the folks that are in that pilot stage, I would just encourage them to maybe, accelerate things a little bit because there's quite a bit coming. And ironically, it's kind of coming from the bottom up, right? We started with kind of the smallest like independent retailers out there. They really were the ones that first leaned into this, and it's been kind of growing up from that scale. And I think probably some of the most exciting stuff ahead in the next year is going to be coming from that regional level. But I know that the nationals too are really interested and have a lot of plans too. So I'm just excited to see the network grow and the industry grow with it.
You mentioned the stats before, but give them to us again. How many stores, how many screens, what does the footprint look like?
Yeah, so just over 4,400 stores in the US, kind of all 50 states. We've got a little over 20,000 screens out there. So it's a pretty big network at this point to manage from an engineering standpoint. And I think what's really kind of mind-blowing is we're reaching about 70 million US shoppers. So about 1 in 4 people today. And so while we've got a lot of growth ahead, I think that it's kind of wild the scale it's getting at. I'm at the point now where I have family friends that text me on a regular basis with pictures of us showing up in their local grocery store, which is kind of fun.
Must be so rewarding to see the growth. It's amazing. Congratulations. It's truly to see how you built it from this idea to this entire footprint. It's really, really remarkable. Well, before I let you run, I've got a couple of fun wrap-up questions for you, which I can't let you leave without. The first one of which, if you're up for it, is sources of inspiration. You touched on it earlier, but I know it's hard to pick two people that have inspired you the most in your professional life.
Yeah, I think I'd kind of give a shout out to my dad on this. Earlier, he started a business when he was, I think, 27, 28, which is around the time when I started working on this company. He actually was a pilot for Braniff Airlines while he was doing that. So he would fly the routes no one wanted Friday through Sunday, and then he'd work Monday through Thursday on the business to be able to fund it. Grew that into what was the largest distributor of motorcycle parts and apparel. So basically anything, if you're into motorcycles and the dealerships that you might buy. And so it was fun growing up seeing just what he had built and kind of, how much sweat it took to do that. I always kind of looked up to that and wanted to be able to go start my own business. And then, in a similar way, I mentioned my cousin who had the company Amazing Grass that he started. And that's, I think, what got me kind of onto the CPG side of things. And this idea that you can almost like create a new industry or create a new category. Because I can tell you when he started, he would pour his product into a drink and show it to you. And it was kind of gross. No one drank green things back then. But it's something that now is just super common. And I think people care a lot about their health and understand the benefits of it. But man, he had to really knock on a lot of doors to help build that category. So
100%. Those are great. When you do get some downtime outside of friends and family, if you get some downtime, I know you're running the company. How do you like to spend your time?
Yeah, I sadly didn't have much in the way of hobbies in the last couple of years, but I did have a goal this year to get into some of that. So, back in high school, I actually learned how to fly planes. It was something that my dad really wanted all of us to learn how to do because of his background in that. And so I got back into flying, and I've started doing that kind of as a weekend activity, and have the goal of eventually maybe having my own plane and being able to fly my kids around. So that's kind of the current fun thing that I'm working on.
If folks want to get in touch with you, find you online, what's the best way for them to reach you and find Grocery TV?
I personally am someone that swore off social media since college, so I'm maybe not the easiest to connect with online, but I am on LinkedIn. Always happy to see people reach out there, and I do a good bit of messaging stuff on that. Always happy to give out my email too when it's the right person. So, and then in terms of the business, obviously grocerytv.com is kind of our main place you can go to learn about us. We're also pretty active on LinkedIn and probably seen posts from us, so that's probably covers it.
Marlow, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.